Welcome to Podcasting Forevers, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Clint Eastwood, where we watch every film directed by and or starring American filmmaker Clint Eastwood and explore how they speak to their moment in this one. Podcast is hosted by two guys. I'm one of the guys. My name is Jake Sturwell.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Ian.
You're so welcome.
It's really nice of you to keep showing up after your termination notice has gone out. A lot of guys would have just phoned it in at this point. We got to bring our guest in. He's already spoken. Unclear if that's going to remain on the microphone, but okay, he's saying no. He's closing the window. We don't have a guest on the show. We're really excited about this. Our guest today is a writer and media critic. He is the co-host of probably our most cited podcast on the show. I hope this is okay for me to say.
I'll tell you after you say it.
We at least aspire to be the Goofus to Citations Needed's Gallant. Or like what's the name of Bart's twin in the attic who eats fish heads?
I don't remember.
Do you guys remember this?
No.
On The Simpsons? Anyway, Nima Shirazi's on the show. Hi, Nima. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
It is great to see you. I believe that's Hugo Simpson. Hugo Simpson the second, possibly, if we're being really, really accurate here. But Hugo is the evil twin in the attic.
But then isn't the reveal that Bart was the bad one?
Yeah, I mean, but Bart's really the good.
Right.
Bart's pretty great.
He's a special little guy. Well, thank you for joining us on the show, Nima.
Yeah, that was a great way for me to start. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. It's really a pleasure to be here.
And to explain what Jake means, whereas our show claims to be critical of media, and then every week we're just like eating out of the dog bowl of what they're telling us to believe in each of these pieces of fiction. Nima hosts a podcast where they do real journalism, real media critique, and cover narratives in depth. So imagine what this show you thought it might be, and then just go check out their show.
The thing you were hoping for. It's over there at Citations Needed.
Far too kind. Far too kind. Thank you, guys. But no, it is. I was utterly thrilled when I got the call through various agents that you found me through. Because obviously,
Ovitz reached out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not just going to talk to anyone.
Is Michael Ovitz dead? No, he's still around.
I think he's around.
Still kicking. But Treat Williams died.
Yeah.
Who played Ovitz?
Yeah, that's a shame. I hope we get into that in depth later on this episode.
Well, to sort of start things off, we have, of course, our famous segment, the two questions. This is the patent is pending. I think I've been receiving a number of phone calls saying I can rush this by sending some kind of a Bitcoin payment. So I think I'm gonna be doing legit. That.
Smart.
But Nima, were you able to come up with a question or two for our segment, the two questions?
I was. Two of them, in fact.
Perfect. That's going to work out great.
Good. Okay, good. The first is, I know we're going to get into this when we start talking about the film that we will be discussing today, which I don't believe we've revealed yet. Although I assume it's in like the episode title.
It's probably in the description.
Not that
unless Ian uploads this one, in which case it's anyone's guess what it'll say.
But because there is such amazing 90s technology featured in Absolute Power.
Yes.
I was going to start with, what is the first movie that you remember purchasing on a VHS cassette tape?
Ooh. Now, in classic two questions fashion, I remember something adjacent to, but totally irrelevant ultimately to. I know for a fact that my first CD was a compilation that I saw advertised on television called Pure Funk. And so
sounds
you
great.
bought
With
one of those infomercials.
Like the scrolling songs from like You Sexy Thing.
Some of them are in red.
Yeah, I was at, I think like Target or something. I was turning 8 and I was getting a little CD player for my birthday and I needed one CD. And so I picked out Pure Funk and it had like James Brown and Sly and the Family Stone and whatever on it. I mean, it was like probably
some of the purest funk around.
That sounds pretty pure. Was it like a volume? Was it like volume 1?
I don't think they ever came back and did a volume 2.
It was comprehensive. It was you just had the pure.
Yeah. Any further funk would be
they got 'em. Yeah,
impure in some way, I think.
That sounds fantastic. Now answer my question.
Yes. Good.
The first VHS tape that I purchased. Oh, you know what? I think it was And now for something completely different, the Monty Python.
Monty Python.
It was
Nice.
like a sketch
big
film,
eye
right?
roll I'm giving you.
Well, I had a friend.
My eyes just went wide with appreciation. That's where I'm at.
I don't believe you. That's the first
I
reaction.
still agree with all those guys and everything that they
you
have
think
to
they've
say
gotten
currently.
better with age, a lot of their ideas and stuff. Yeah.
Well, so I had a friend named Derek who had the full Flying Circus VHS set that was in a giant purple box. Did you ever have this or know anybody who had this?
We had this at my house.
It's like 5 feet long worth of VHS tapes. So that was my first tape as far as I know. Nima, are you a Python guy?
That sounds great. Yeah, no, I'm a fan, and certainly was when VHS tapes were all the rage. But actually, that leads me to, can I do like a first question point 1 or point 2, however it works, BAB or something, a follow up. I'm going to do the initial follow up that Adam always does, like during the guest interviews. He asks the first question, then he's like, "Wait, can I just follow up on that?"
Please do, please do.
So my follow up question to that answer, Jake, is, and this is, we don't actually need to go into depth here because I think there's actually a correct answer. Who is the best member of Monty Python?
Chapman. He's dead. He died before he could do anything upsetting.
Good answer. Smart.
Graham Chapman, I think,
good
is
answer. That's a safe answer.
Yeah. No, I think that's correct.
I disagree with that answer, but it's not a bad
I like
answer.
Michael Palin.
He's the best.
Because I think
he's the best guy.
Okay, good. I like him, I think, in part because I, too, with sufficient fame, would try to parlay this into a career as a travel show host because it seems fun and easy. And if you can get people to pay you to go look at cool stuff, like, great.
Yeah, it's a human thing to do.
I've just found I actually recently was rewatching a bunch of Monty Python things because one of my kids is at an age that I was like, I think she should watch at least something. And so we've watched a couple of the movies and some of the shows, and it immediately became clear to me that by far the most comfortable performer, consistently funniest person, and the one who never seems like he's working that hard. Like Eric Idle's amazing, but he's really working. Like he's working to be funny. And Palin is so natural that when you go back to revisit any of those things, which I hope you do, or maybe not, I hope you agree with me. It winds up being Michael Palin.
He is so winning. Even in like A Fish Called Wanda, where the joke is that he's stuttering.
Yeah. Oh, he's the hero.
And you compare that to a Cleese who, look, has his moments, but if we're talking about people who feel like they're trying hard all the time to
I mean, Cleese is very funny, and I do think
amazing. They're all amazing. The thing is, they're all amazing.
Yeah, his ability to weaponize how much he looks like a guy who, like in one of those clubs in London, like a guy who can get into any door in the United Kingdom.
Someone who inherited their job as a headmaster somewhere.
Yes. He's actually, interestingly, John Cleese will come up on this episode almost in relevant form, which is interesting that this
I look forward to that.
Ian, answer the question.
I have some questions piling up. Well, if I'm going to be honest with my 13-year-old self, I had already seen a lot of Holy Grail, loved Holy Grail. If we're talking about the member of Monty Python that I was most enamored with, there's that part in The Meaning of Life where there's a bunch of naked young ladies running, and I had a burned copy
it was one of them
that immediately became like my private dark DVD that I was like, oh my god,
it was like worn out in that part.
Yeah, somehow. No, I think you guys.
Carol
are right.
Cleveland is your favorite member?
Maybe, yeah. In terms of first VHS, I can't remember the first VHS that I bought. I do remember what was that film that we just talked about, Jake? The
Unforgiven.
No, not that one. The Kangaroo Knights of Virtue. What's it called?
Oh, Warriors of Virtue.
Warriors of Virtue.
Yeah.
I remember having to campaign for my parents to buy me that because I saw it at a sleepover. Also, just the beginning of it.
Satanic, because I think it is. I mean, it's fairly evil seeming. It's a Ronnie Yu film. The Hong Kong director came over to, I guess, to America, but made this extremely Australian seeming movie about giant magical kangaroos who wield the powers of the Tao Te Ching and battle a warlord.
So that, and then Bedknobs and Broomsticks we watched on like a sub day at school, and I felt like, oh, this is as good as films get, basically.
Nice.
So we got to have this.
That's nice. I think as long as you answer anything other than like Faces of Death, you're okay.
I've never seen Faces of Death. I
That's
have
good.
clicked
That's
on
why you sound like a very well-rounded person.
links that tricked me into seeing a guy like start to get beheaded and then click it, but does this still happen to people on the internet? Do Zoomers have this experience?
Couldn't tell you. I'm a very old person.
Well, it seems like with TikTok, anything's possible. You can just be scrolling and somebody else has.
They're seeing much worse stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'd imagine.
But I like how we're getting into the difference between having access to certain kind of tech. I think, as we will potentially get into, the lack of the internet is actually pervasive through watching Absolute Power.
Right.
And so again, it gets back to our tech question. Now that we've talked about this for 25 minutes, I'll be quick with my answer, which is, I believe it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I had already seen, but then I was like, I need to own that. My family was pretty late in getting a VHS player, but once we had one, the title started stacking up. So it was either that or Ishtar.
How do you feel? Oh, Ishtar is good, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, actually. Yeah, it's amazing.
The opening sequence of Ishtar is one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen when they're trying to write the song.
Yeah, telling the truth can be dangerous business. That's like my guiding principle for my professional career.
Makes sense. Do you still like Temple of Doom? How have your feelings on Temple of Doom changed?
They've only grown. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the
yeah.
I get it. It's super colonial and racist. It is also just fantastic.
I just find
it really is
so
great.
Mean and angry. Like the movie just feels like it's having a bad time. And so I don't want to hang out with it because
every
it's
sequence
in
is
a bad
just
place.
Magic to me. It was also the first Indiana Jones movie that I saw. I saw it before I saw
That's
Raiders.
important.
I think that's also true of me.
And so that is it holds a very important place. And then I saw Crusade in the theater when it came out.
Wow, that's cool.
Well,
wow, that was like a wow, you're old. Wow, thanks.
No,
I mean, I saw Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the new one yet.
I have.
How was it?
Anyway, what's the second question?
Well, I've got it here. We haven't really narrowed down. Should we be making our guests ask 2 questions? It seems unfair. We should be doing one from them and one from us. Don't you think, Ian?
I kind of enjoyed this process of just letting them see how much of the burden they were willing to shoulder before they put up any kind of resistance, started to ask about whose podcast this was. But I think it's fine if we want to ask a question.
I also don't love the insinuation that because of my first question that actually turned into 2 questions that you want to limit this process from
Not
here
at
on
all.
out.
No. It's just...
But I get it. I agree with you.
Why don't we hear the second question?
My second question?
And then we'll decide.
That feels much meaner to
No,
them.
I'm
You're
kidding.
It's totally
I'm
fine.
kidding.
That's great. Let's do it. Let's do it. A 1-2 punch. Have you ever had a near-death experience?
Ooh.
Again, related to what we're about to talk about.
So I was just talking to my girlfriend about the OA, the Netflix
I remember
show.
that show. I saw the first season.
It's about pretty much anything you can come up with, but it is in part about near-death experiences. The creators of that show have a new show coming out. At some point, it's been delayed by the evil studio heads, but I don't think I've had a near-death experience. I haven't talked about this on the show. Let's get real, man. I did do some ketamine-assisted therapy, which did not really take, I would have to say. If anyone listening to the show can probably tell it, the results were mixed. But this is not a near-death experience, but this is my closest encounter with some sense of a beyond.
The kind of guys who talk about near-death experiences also would talk about ketamine. So I think this is fine. Yeah.
Basically just felt like I was in the walls of reality, and it was sort of prickly and cold. And then I would come back and a guy who looked exactly like me but in 40 years with a giant mandala tattooed on his chest would say, so how is that meaningful to you that you were thinking about a Zelda level? I was like, I don't know, man. It seemed like this is horseshit. And then they would get Goop Kitchen delivered to the office for all of the licensed freaks and weirdos who work there. So now, Ian, you hurt yourself a lot. I'm aware of this. I know about this.
Yeah, I have hurt myself plenty of times. I don't know that I've ever had a true near-death experience. Once when I was surfing in high school.
We're all really impressed.
So I was surfing and my board came off, and the purpose of these straps is to keep them close to you, keep the boards close so you don't lose them. But the elasticity of the strap whipped the board back right by my face, and it cut the side of my face, but was like inches from having just collided fully into my face.
Yeah.
And it was too fast to have had any kind of meaningful spiritual experience, but it just kind of thing in retrospect, you realize like, oh, that's how your life can have ended. That's one of the options for the way your life goes.
Sure.
And I think that's healthy, actually, is my stance on it.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not really the kind of person that I would have thought would ask this question.
Sure.
Like I don't have like an awesome answer to it. Like that I'm kind of, seeding this in order to get my own personal story out. So I don't have that, but
I feel like you've brought a real like sleepover vibe to the two questions segment
like,
that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's
thanks. Great. Oh, that's really nice. I think that has to do with the fact that we're talking about something from the 90s. And so, I once almost hit a bear with a bicycle that I was riding down a mountain. So I almost like ran into a bear. Like a bear hopped over a railing of the road as I was like cruising down a mountain in Vermont when I was 13 years old.
The Green Mountain, they call it.
That's right. It was terrifying. It was actually on my way down from Smuggler's Notch, which is a very steep incline. So I was cruising and I saw a bear up ahead hop over the railing and I had to slam on my brakes so I didn't run into it. So that was horrible, but also kind of amazing and life affirming. And then another time it's funny, my near-death experiences, I'm now realizing, if they even are that, are all like outdoorsy things, and I'm not an outdoorsy person.
I was about to add, I'm not aware of where the red fern grows childhood.
That's what's amazing. I'm from New York City. I do not, but I think what this is telling me is that I almost die when I am in nature. So actually it's been a warning to me, because the second one was when I was in my early 20s and I went on like a camping and hiking trip. This is so weird. I don't do that ever. And I slipped on a rock and fell in between these two very jagged rocks that had rushing like rapids between them.
Whoa.
Oh, shit.
And was taken away by the current. And the hat that I was wearing came off. And my first instinct was to not let my hat get away. So instead of grabbing the sides of the, chasm that I was in, I reached out to get my hat and went, further down the rapids, injuring myself a little bit. But it, then I was pulled out, whisked out, and that was lovely. And then I resumed the hike, and I did actually rescue my hat.
This is very relatable to me, because I've often...
In what way?
After bad stuff happens to me, I've often realized that I was making a situation worse by trying to preserve something that is not important, and then got myself...
I mean, you don't know what this hat.
Further mess up. More like, you're trying not to hurt your finger and then you hurt your whole arm kind of thing. I'm just a bad prioritizer, I think.
Yeah. I really didn't want to lose this hat. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
What kind of hat was this? Can we describe the hat?
Well, it was a hat. It was a yellow hat with the logo of a Greek soccer club called IEK, IEK, that I had just acquired.
Okay. New hat.
Earlier that year when I had been in Greece, and I really didn't want to see this go down the rapids and be lost forever. So I reached out and grabbed it, tore up my shoulder.
I think that's fair to try to preserve your new hat that's hard to replace. Yeah. Well, thank you for this. And speaking of hats, great transition, because we watched a film with some tremendous hat work by the man Clint Eastwood. Some of my favorite hats I've seen on the man. And this is a guy whose career is full of remarkable hats. Let's not forget. Today we are talking about, as mentioned, Absolute Power. This is a film directed by Clint Eastwood and released February 14th, 1997. This is a Valentine's release.
Date movie.
Up there with other great Valentine's Day films like Alita Battle Angel. I remember seeing that on Valentine's Day. And that's all I can remember. That's, I think, as far as I know, the only two films ever to be released on Valentine's Day.
I think I saw a horror movie called Valentine that was released on Valentine's Day.
Not My Bloody Valentine?
No. It's just called Valentine with...
Interesting.
Is this like Happy Death Day?
David Boreanaz? Is that that guy's name?
Angel himself.
Angel himself. And it's like a slasher film. And I believe it was released on that day. Oh, you know what? I just looked it up. Citations acquired. And it was released actually on February 2nd, 2001.
Okay. So it was playing.
Maybe I used it as a date movie that year.
Yeah.
Something like that. Why don't we have that be the story?
Yeah, that's great.
From now on.
Terrific. Now, I first saw this film we discussed this on our Unforgiven episode. I first came to this film as a Gene Hackman guy. Before I was really a Clint Eastwood guy, I was a Gene Hackman guy.
Mm-hmm.
Nima, I've noticed that your Twitter bio refers to the Kane Hackman theory from PCU.
Indeed.
Which is a movie that my Republican stepfather had on DVD for reasons that I think were probably not good ones. I think he...
Yeah.
I mean, that movie's kind of evil, but I have seen it a number of times.
It has bad politics. Politics.
And also, I would say bad jokes, bad structure, bad acting. And yet... But
it's the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom of the 90s.
Exactly. This is a terrific Hackman film, but also Eastwood is reuniting with him from Unforgiven. And I remember the first time I watched this movie, I just thought this is exactly the kind of shit that I want. And this movie has so many things in it that I am just delighted by, that I wish every movie had. It's no surprise that it was written by William Goldman, the screenwriter your mom has probably heard of. Writer of a number of things, but probably most notably Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and
The Princess Bride,
the novel
Marathon Man, All the President's Men.
All the President's Men, crucially. He is apparently the guy who talked Matt Damon and Ben Affleck out of the part of their script for Good Will Hunting where Will Hunting saves the world.
I remember hearing this. Yeah, there's like a nuclear crisis or
something.
They
were originally he was going to solve another math problem on a chalkboard, but this one was going to end the world or something. So I highly recommend folks check out. William Goldman's written 3 memoirs and is maybe the only guy who I would say that's not obnoxious about. And in Which Lie Did I Tell, which is the one he wrote in 2000, he describes the whole process of writing this movie. He says he calls it the hardest screenplay I've ever written, because adapting the book was so difficult. This is based on a book by David Baldacci, whose work can be found in any Walgreens you walk into. He's one of those guys.
I only know him from New York subway advertisements.
Yeah, I mean, Clint is now in his airport novel phase.
Yeah,
he has kind of an airport novel
phase.
Exactly, but specifically Dad's bookshelf at the cabin, not Dad's bookshelf at home. These are beach reads, and it's a wonderful thing because these movies are beach read movies. You could put these on when you're sick. You put these on when you don't know what else to watch. First of all, Nima, what is your relationship to Clint Eastwood? To this movie, Clint Eastwood generally? How do you feel about the man?
I like a lot of Clint Eastwood movies. I think the fun part and the cultural and societal value of your podcast is that there's a man that is deeply troubled and has terrible politics, and yet can be a really refined artist. And also there's the artistry plus the fact that, he's been a part of a number of cinematic touchstone releases, for lack of a better way to say it, important fucking movies.
Yes.
Whether they're good or not, but just important fucking movies. And I think a lot of them are good. I absolutely love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It is one of my very favorite movies of all time. Clint actually being wonderful in it, but definitely second, possibly third fiddle.
I would say so, yeah.
To Lee Van Cleef, and certainly Eli Wallach, who is the star of the film and is absolutely incredible throughout. One of, I think, the best leading performances in movie history as Tuco. But also, I remember actually seeing The Gauntlet, which you guys did a great episode on. I think I was probably in high school and I saw it. I think it was re-released as maybe at the Film Forum in New York. And I saw The Gauntlet and really dug it.
This cool high school kid. I mean, I know you didn't mean to show off, but I was in high school. I went to Film Forum.
And of course, there are there's your Dirty Harry along the way. There's your Pale Rider. There's your Outlaw Josie Wales. They're just good shit. Fucking good shit. And, and then you get to, as you all are exploring, him becoming a filmmaker, right? And I mean, a number of the films I mentioned, obviously he directed, but then getting to be Oscar caliber, right? I mean, one of the reasons I'm thrilled to be talking about Absolute Power is because I was too daunted to talk about Unforgiven. Felt like I couldn't. I didn't want to be on that episode.
Same, but nobody stepped up.
It's a big
we
deal.
also didn't want to be on that episode.
So, but I wanted to get the Eastwood Hackman alliance here. And so this was the other way to do it. I love the fact that they are never on screen together also.
No.
Which is really, I don't know if they were on set together.
Well, I mean,
maybe
I think
something went down during Unforgiven.
Clint said, and so I read through some of the William Goldman book, which you can check out for free on the Internet Archive. Shout out to the Internet Archive. It's extraordinarily entertaining, probably false in some places, but he talks about, first of all, at one point, Goldman calls him, he says of himself, I am, and this is inarguable, one of the 4 all-time great Knicks fans.
Oh.
Which, like, all right.
That's kind of cool.
Man.
I like that.
Long-time season ticket holder. Yeah.
Many of the important, because he apparently remembers, I guess he's probably got a lot of script drafts in various colors. He's got his goldenrod draft. He remembers like every impasse he came to in every script writing project he's ever worked on. And so often he apparently figures out what to do at a Knicks game. Notably, so he has trouble adapting this book because the book, by his accounting, has 10 major characters, none of which is an obvious film protagonist. In the book, spoilers for a book that came out in 1996, you've already watched the movie, who cares? Luther is killed halfway through the book, like Psycho style, kind of as a shock.
Wow.
And then the main thrust of the plot is taken over by his former son-in-law, who's not a character in the movie, the guy who used to be maybe engaged to or actually married to the Laura Linney character, then takes over the plot. And this is just too much. And so first, the movie goes through many drafts. Eventually, the guy who suggests, so I think first it gets to Eastwood. Eastwood likes it, but he says by Goldman's calculation, he figures out that the Ed Harris character should probably be the protagonist. He gets it to Eastwood. He's always wanted to work with Eastwood. He thinks this is great. Eastwood, classic cop character, terrific, slam dunk. And Eastwood says, I want to play the Luther character, but I think Luther shouldn't die because he's the best character. Everyone's going to like him. And Goldman is famous at this point. In his novels, apparently all of the likable characters die. This is like a thing he does. And so he's like, what the fuck am I going to do? What am I going to do? He goes to a Knicks game against Houston. He remembers this. With Tony Gilroy, Ian's favorite guy. Ian is always telling me to watch Andor. I haven't watched Andor. I'm busy.
I like Andor. I like Michael Clayton, but I would not describe him as my favorite guy.
He's your favorite guy. You have a poster of him. You know what he looks like. Yeah. So Tony Gilroy is the one who figures out that you can do this. Most notably, he has not read the book. So he's like, I'm your ace in the hole. I don't care about what happens in the book. Because in the book, Luther and Kate, the Laura Linney character, do not speak. They don't interact at all in the book, which is crazy because that is like the main thrust of the film emotionally. So anyway, they crack it, and Goldman has some lovely things to say about Eastwood. He says he's the only director or movie star he's ever seen besides Paul Newman to wait in line for his tray at craft services.
It's very winning.
A man of the people.
This is, someone should do a podcast about this guy. But anyway, before we get into the film, we got to do the thing where we say where you can watch it, because I think everybody should watch the film. It's a delightful film, available all the usual places, and also the dreaded Max. We hate Max, everything it stands for. Yeah. David Zaslav. I think on our episode on The Rookie, I challenged him to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I don't know, and neither does he. But Max and Zaslav, enemies of the pod. Ian, for folks who are down there in Mexico, where can they watch the film Absolute Power?
It is available on Amazon and Apple TV.
Now, Nima, you might not know about this, but when you're in Mexico, because they speak Spanish down there, it is called...
What? You might not know about this.
It's called not...
This is a learning
Apple
show.
TV. It's called Manzana TV.
I mean, that makes sense. Although it is a brand name. Is that really true?
No, it's really true.
No, it's a lie. What he has said is false.
It's a bit that I've been doing. And we've also... I recently, my beloved uberduck.ai, where I was contracting AI celebrity voices to say Manzana TV for me, has been like cease and desisted or something. I can't use it anymore. It's gone. So I found a new one that is called Fake You, which I don't know what that means. It seems sort of aggressive. But anyway, I got someone to say this for us, and I would love for you guys to guess who this is supposed to be.
Did you do it on like a cameo? Did you get like Alan Alda to do the voice?
No. This is free. This is fake. This is a computer did this.
Generally much less recognizable than a real person's voice.
They had to burn a tree down to run the computers to make this happen. So I'm going to play this voice. I would love for you guys to guess who this is.
Monzana TV.
You each get one guess because you're not going to get it. But I would just love to hear who you think.
Can we hear it one more time?
Monzana TV. Monzana TV.
I will say this, the person this is supposed to be is intimately involved with this film.
I'm going to say it's, well, my first inclination was to say Judy Davis, but I don't think it's her. I'm going to go with Laura Linney.
Okay, this is a good guess. Ian?
My first instinct was Laura Linney, and I'm going to go somebody intimately involved in the production of this film.
A huge force behind the film.
Okay, Hillary Clinton.
Monzana TV.
This is what happens when you type in to fakeyou.com or whatever that you want the phrase Monzana TV to be spoken by Clint Eastwood. So I found a really worthy replacement.
I have some sense of your confidence
We're
now.
in great.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Man, they
watch the
really
movie.
nailed it.
Yeah,
No wonder AI is coming for everyone's jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're so
Yeah.
close.
there's a really great
Yeah.
Citations Needed episode about how that's very true and actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So wait, what did William Goldman figure out at the Knicks Rockets game?
he figured out that he could put Kate and Luther together. He could throw out the fact that they are estranged throughout the plot. That's what he figured out.
Well, look, I love that part of the film. I am going to
That
contest.
just came with watching like Clyde Drexler.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You just figured that out.
Tony Gilroy, specifically. Yeah.
I may argue that I don't know that he did crack this story exactly, which I don't think prevents it from being an enjoyable watch in the
Yeah,
slightest. But
I would say it's an extraordinarily entertaining film. I think it was Janet Maslin in the New York Times who said that she described the plot as quietly berserk, which I think is terrific. It's a terrific phrase. But this movie is so in the line of fire, which as we record this, it hasn't come out yet, but will be out when you hear this. Anyway, you all loved the episode. So that was a Castle Rock production directed by Wolfgang Peterson.
Mhm.
And that was a Castle Rock picture and distributed through Columbia. Clint's first film not with Warner Brothers in like decades. By this point, this is also a Castle Rock picture. But Castle Rock, since In the Line of Fire, was first acquired by Turner Broadcasting System with New Line Cinema co-financing. And then TBS merges with Warner Brothers in 1996. So this is a Castle Rock film, but it's also a Warner Brothers film.
He's back home.
The man sees he's playing four-dimensional chess. It is directed by Clint. It is shot by Jack N. Green. It is edited by Joel Cox. The score is by Lenny Niehaus. The gang's all here, folks. We've talked about it a little bit. What did we think of the movie?
Have you talked about Jack N. Green before on this show?
Yeah, he's come up a little bit. He's the guy who replaces Bruce Surtees. I think this movie does a lot of what's attributed to Bruce Surtees in the Clint look, which is extraordinarily dark frames. There's no fear of using a lot of blackness, especially. I mean, the first sequence of this movie, so much of it just keeps cutting back to Clint silently standing, half in shadow, looking disapprovingly.
With half of his face, cut off. Yeah,
he's like wearing a shadow hat.
It works for me though. It's almost like they don't trust you to have recalled that Clint is witnessing this whole thing, but Clint is giving like really soft reactions to the things that he's seeing, and I like
the opening sequence is not where the problems.
No,
No, the opening sequence is, I think, the best part of the movie. I was describing this to some folks at work, just saying I rewatched Absolute Power. It's this movie where a jewel thief accidentally sits in a cuck chair watching the president of the United States rape and murder a woman, and they're like, "Damn, that sounds great." I'm like, "Yeah, it does sound great."
90s, man. Yeah,
yeah.
Like that sounds exactly like the 90s.
I'm just reminding myself that Jack N. Green did go on to work as the cinematographer of course, many, many Clint Eastwood movies. Girl Interrupted, 51st Dates, okay.
40-Year-Old Virgin, Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hot Tub Time Machine was the one I was going to point out. Also, both Diary of a Wimpy Kid films and something from 2009 called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay.
Hey, he was working.
He's still doing it.
He was working,
folks,
you
Yeah, folks, you're gonna have to sign up for a Patreon if you want us to cover Oy Vey, My Son is Gay. We will do it. It features Lainey Kazan, so plenty to talk about. Oh, and Saul Rubinek from Unforgiven.
Oh.
Yeah, I learned through this process of rewatching this movie and then looking it up a little bit that Jack N. Green, before he became promoted to cinematographer, was a camera operator on such films as 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop, which just sounds amazing because that would have been amazing to be on both of those sets.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With Eddie. I watched another 48 Hours recently.
Ooh.
I think when we were getting ready for The Rookie, because it came out the same year, sort of a buddy cop thing. I mean, not awful.
No, but not quite as good.
It's not 48 Hours.
It's not 48 Hours.
I also, in rewatching 48 Hours, I remembered Nick Nolte saying racial slurs probably 100 times in the movie, and he only does it like twice. So I was relieved to...
But he does it with such Nick Nolte force that it just like shakes your bones.
It feels like 300.
Yeah, the man's voice is like, it feels like bone conduction headphones somehow. It feels like it's inside you.
Yeah.
So we started to describe the plot a little bit. Ian, do you want to give us a quick plot rundown?
Happy to. Always happy to. So you got through the craziest parts. Clint Eastwood as jewel thief of advanced age now, doing what is maybe going to be one of his big last heists of this billionaire's house. We don't know most of this yet. All we see is
the
Clint
big house.
Eastwood break his way into a pretty ugly mansion.
This mansion is, by the way, it's a Catholic girls' school in Maryland.
Okay. Great. It seems to have about that level of security, I would say, for a guy's house.
They usually have more security at the girls' school.
Millions of dollars in it.
Anyway, yeah.
And then he, like you said, he ends up hiding behind a one-way mirror. And
he realizes there's this vault that's behind, like... This brings up an important question. I'd like to ask both of you.
I want to know
this.
He doesn't realize that there's a vault.
Yes.
He has planned that. He knows that there's a vault.
And there's a little clicker that opens the vault. Now, why is it called a two-way mirror? Ian knows exactly what I'm going to ask.
Yep.
This is a kind of dumb bullshit question that I think podcasts are born for, but also I think it's an important one because you can only see through it one way.
Yes. This is why I tried to take a stance.
Is this how you feel, Ian? Are you with me on this?
Precisely how I feel. Yeah, a two-way mirror doesn't make sense in either direction because it's not
neither
a
is
two-way window, nor is it a mirror in both directions.
A two-way mirror is a pane of glass, I guess.
Sure.
Sometimes they're a little reflective, you know? Nima, do you have any insight?
I think it's a mirror that maybe does two things. Right, so like I don't think this is why it's called this. But
isn't there one of those movies that no one's ever seen, but it was nominated for Best Picture called like The Mirror Has Two Faces, something like that? Is that a movie? Sounds familiar.
I believe it is. Yeah.
You find out it has like Peter O'Toole in it or something.
But like a two-way mirror seems like right. I mean, it could just be like two mirrors put back to back, but it's one mirror. The thing is that it's one thing that does two things.
Yeah, it's like a mirror plus. Introducing Mirror Plus. So I was trying to remember if I had ever knowingly encountered a two-way mirror in my life. I learned there was some alarmist Twitter post like 10 years ago about how if you're in a hotel room,
of mirrors. Okay.
You should check to see if there's a gap behind the mirror in the bathroom, because otherwise you're probably in an H.H. Holmes situation where someone is like watching you and is going to kill you, or just, I guess, watch you take a shower or something. And then I realized that I almost certainly have encountered many, many two-way mirrors at the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. I got to imagine that this place is chock-a-block with them and various theme park rides that we've all encountered. But do you guys know that you've been in I guess I'm asking if either of you have ever been interrogated by the police? Interrogation room?
I don't have much experience with two-way mirrors, no.
Couple of well-behaved boys on the show. Ian?
Yeah, neither do I. I will say that having worked in multiple hotels, I can say with great confidence there's no way most of those mirrors are two-way unless they've figured out a way to somehow do that cheaper than having a normal mirror, because that is the thinking behind every single decision in a hotel. So
Ian was the house detective in a number of hotels from the 1930s.
That's right. Yeah.
So then what happens, Ian?
So he watches as, again, we don't know who these people are initially, Gene Hackman and somebody's wife come into the room.
Yeah, this is Melora Hardin, by the way, from The Office.
It is, and also from Monk, I think, right? Monk lady.
She's on Monk, and she's the daughter of Jerry Hardin, who played Deep Throat on The X-Files.
Oh, so they come in, they are engaging in a drunken rendezvous, seemingly for not the first time. It turns violent, and she tries to defend herself, eventually getting hold of a letter opener with which she's going to stab Gene Hackman. And at that point, he calls for help. and two suited agents bust in and shoot her to death.
So there is this like flash that comes over him where all of a sudden he just becomes like the most pathetic man in the world.
Yeah,
when
I
he
thought
decides to yell help.
effective. That
It's
he's
very
like
effective.
A Gollum character who can become just so pitiable. And
Gollum RFK Jr. might be a pretty good ticket, actually. I would vote for Gollum. Yeah, but so the guys come in. It's Scott Glenn and Dennis Haysbert.
yes,
Scott Glenn, you've seen in a million things. The Right Stuff with Ed Harris, by the way, who's about to show up. Hi, Cassie, for
Urban
me.
Cowboy.
Favorite film, Urban Cowboy. He's the director of the CIA in the third and fourth Bourne movies, which will come up in a bit. And then Dennis Haysbert is the president himself on 24. Is that right? I never saw the show. Also, he's the insurance man. I gotta say, my favorite insurance.
I mean, he's also Serrano from Major League. Please.
I have not seen the Major League.
I haven't seen any of the Major Leagues either.
There's
this is
three
what we
of
brought
them?
you on the Major League. Yeah, I think it's a trilogy, right?
What's your favorite Major League film?
There's one Major League. I mean, yes, there
the
are, but, like Major League.
Okay.
Yeah. Which was written by David S. Ward, written and directed, who also wrote The Sting.
Right.
Got Mr. Sheen on there, Mr. Carlos Estevez.
Isn't Wesley Snipes in those?
Yeah, of course. Willie Mays Hayes.
Well, no, I'm going to watch it.
Oh, it's a Major League is fantastic.
Okay.
Fan-fucking-tastic. So that was my introduction to Dennis Haysbert. And he's only impressed since.
I mean, I think compared to all the Geico bullshit, Flo from Progressive, Jake from State Farm, whom I hate.
Allstate, you're in good hands.
Yeah, he's just like the least obnoxious insurance salesman.
Which is why I thought his unsettling nature, his sort of like...
Oh, he is silent and deadly in this.
Really impressive in this. So they come in, and then who follows but...
The chief of staff.
The chief of staff, Judy Davis. She's an Australian actress from My Brilliant Career, many other things. Barton Fink, of course. She later plays Nancy Reagan in a TV movie with James Brolin as Ronald Reagan, which I think is interesting. But we now get this weird confluence. I mean, I think, Nima, you described the movie this way when we were emailing about it. This is Clint's like Clinton crime family movie.
Oh, yeah.
And you get this weird sort of transubstantiation of Hillary into the chief of staff because the haircut is identical. In the book, I read a little bit of the book.
Shrill and cutthroat and professional and vaguely like feminist, but also needy. There's a whole thing going on.
She's got all of the woman's classic insecurities. Every reason that a woman shouldn't be president is present in this character because she's all over the place.
She's exasperated at his nonsense, at Gene Hackman's president's nonsense, but also putty in his hands when he wants to compliment her.
In the book, she's very clearly in love with him, and like the sort of cuck queen aspect of it is more pronounced. I think in the book, there's a scene where they're in the limo on the way to the mansion, and the president and Christy Sullivan are fooling around while Gloria Russell is just like working on some papers like in the same part of the limousine. There's this kind of the sexual dynamics are more pronounced. I found out the word cuck queen was first used in like 1652. That seemed like a word that came about in the last 10 years, but no.
Yeah, I thought Elon Musk thought of that.
He hasn't thought of anything.
Yeah. The Gloria Russell character played, I mean, with real hysterical lack of any sort of restraint.
It's a very impressive
scenery chewing, but also somehow like genius in this weird way.
Yeah.
By Judy Davis. Basically, it's like, be a character that Newt Gingrich would hate most of all, like the most hated human who could wield power.
Yes.
Right. In the government. Right. And so here she is chief of staff to President Alan Richmond. I mean, she like bursts into the room after the shots have been fired. And instantly, I mean, even just the way that she's made up, the way that she's dressed, the way that everything, that you're supposed to hate this person.
Yes.
Right.
And that kind of follows through for the entirety of the film. Really, it's like, this Clint Eastwood fever dream fantasy of what if justice would finally be visited upon the Clinton family and everyone that helps them do their evil evil work.
Yeah, let's stop for just a second with the plot summary and talk about the Clinton crime family and what exactly this means, because it means a number of things. I was on one of Wikipedia's great pages earlier, which is, of course, entitled Clinton Body Count Conspiracy Theory, which does not, in fact, refer to the man's prodigious
Philandering,
sexual marauding,
sexual appetites.
Yeah,
I called him a sexual marauder on an earlier episode. Somewhere between horn dog and criminal of the highest order. Just, he's not personally between those, but his activities seem to sort of occupy this spectrum. But the Clintons were hated from the Arkansas days, right? Weren't they called like the Little Rock Mafia or something? He had a kind of fiefdom as the governor of Arkansas, shady dealings of the sort of pretty standard presidential business type. And then also all of his sexual impropriety. A bunch of people around the Clintons kept dying. Although when you read through this list on Wikipedia, it becomes clear that when you're the president, you just know a lot of guys who are in small planes a lot more often than other types of people. Like, I don't really know. Most of my friends are not in a small plane once a month. And so that just ups the opportunity for mysterious death.
Yeah.
You also just don't know that many guys, whereas a presidential hopeful.
Right. And this is like
this
was the Clinton party line was like the president just has a much wider list of acquaintances than most people, which
and most of
is
them
true.
have small jets.
Yes, exactly. Or they are sharing a small jet. There was also a crash with where 35 people died, and then you get into the kind of, can you believe that they killed all these innocent people just to get to one man? Which a number of my favorite films involve this kind of absurd plot where they, you crash the whole plane for one guy. But
I mean, if you know anything about U.S. government drone strikes, then it makes a lot more sense.
See, but that's going to be one of my main objections to both this film and the Clinton crime family conspiracy theories, which is that what people object to more than anything is the idea that these presidents are getting away with interpersonal crimes.
Yes.
That's the highest order of evil doing, of being untrustworthy, of being corrupt and conniving, right?
So much higher than a drone strike.
Right. If you have sexual relations with that woman, then you are not to be trusted politically. Whereas, of course, you could invade and occupy all the countries you want. You can destroy all the economies you want. And that's what makes you, a great man.
You're just a pragmatist in that case. You're opting for sanctions instead of murder, which is actually quite generous of spirit.
What's so baffling, what's so surprising about this film and the book is that the book comes out in 96. The movie comes out in February 97. The Lewinsky-Clinton affair, the actual affair, not the affair in the Dreyfus affair sense, is happening at this time and has not yet been disclosed.
Must have been so stressful to see this.
I wonder if they saw it together.
Yeah, I mean, I know Clinton saw In the Line of Fire, and they decided not to use his blurb because they were worried that it would turn off Republican viewers, which is really funny. But thinking about that, also thinking about Kennedy, because that movie is so obsessed with Kennedy, we do have, I think Clinton is probably the first horn dog president since Kennedy, right? I mean, you get Jimmy Carter's lust in his heart, but other than that, you don't really get...
I think Ford was...
But was he seen to be
a freak?
A lot of skirts.
Was he seen to be a swordsman?
No.
Gerald Sword.
Probably not.
Which is interesting because, I mean, when you look at who, especially people on the right, go absolutely apeshit over, it is the guys who are sexually violating mores, as opposed to, NAFTA starts under Reagan.
And they were young in that office, which was also, I think, probably a threat to a kind of older conservative order. But what's kind of fascinating is the Clinton presidency sort of starts out with the movie Dave coming out in 93, right? Also, incidentally, here's a good connection. Laura Linney is the Lewinsky of that. Years before Lewinsky, she's the aide. And then at the end of the presidency, I mean, looking toward in the second term, rather, of Clinton. There's a turn, and there's like a kind of darker take on presidential matters. I mean, just what is it? A month before Absolute Power comes out, the Charlie Sheen, we talked about Charlie Sheen earlier, Charlie Sheen movie Shadow Conspiracy comes out. And then just a couple months later, there's Murder at 1600 with Wesley Snipes, who's also come up.
That movie is a lot of fun.
Episode, as has Alan Alda, who's the bad guy in that, which also makes no sense because Alan Alda cannot be a bad guy.
It makes sense as a twist, but then once the twist happens, because you wouldn't have seen it coming, you're
doesn't feel right.
Yeah. That movie also, and speaking about Jerry Hardin and the X-Files, there is this obsession throughout the 90s with federal overreach, and there's a growing, maybe this is related to like end of history stuff, there's just a growing sense that like the enemy of the people, the American people now is the federal government. The enemy of the American people that has replaced the Soviets is the American federal government. And you get, especially in like Murder at 1600 and in this film, the good guy is the local cop. They're both DC homicide guys who are the ones who are actually fighting for real justice against the Secret Service, who are
Ed Harris's character. What's his name? Seth
Frank. Yeah.
Seth Frank. Two first names. His like bona fides are, entrenched because he spent 8 years as a homicide cop in New York. So he's legit before making it to DC.
Whereas Scott Glenn's character, formerly a cop, has joined what you're describing as like the dark legion of federal officers, right? He's in the swamp.
But you're supposed to think he's noble the whole time. I mean, even though he's the first one who shoots
for me, I gotta say.
At least he shoots her in the shoulder, and then I think
that's because he's so loyal to his job, right? And then he realizes that he has done the wrong thing. He starts taping conversations.
That's right. But he also says that they should call the cops in the room. I mean, at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that ultimately, that is what like shakes Judy Davis out of her freak out, is she immediately turns, she says, now think about that for a second. Like she's able to come back and contain.
That's right.
So meanwhile, we've got Luther fleeing the scene. They're through some bumps and mistakes. The murder weapon is dropped out of Judy Davis's purse, and Luther grabs it on his way out the window. They give chase. Of course, Clint Eastwood is able to outrun these men on foot. This also happens in the book. Look, if you're a professional jewel thief, you're going to keep in shape. It's
cardio.
Yeah. And the first thing he does is he goes and sees his daughter, Kate, played by Laura Linney, as we mentioned, who is incidentally the exact age of Clint Eastwood's first daughter, Kimber, who was conceived outside of his marriage to Maggie Eastwood with a woman named Roxanne Tunis, who I think was a stunt person whom he had met on Rawhide. And Kimber's existence was often rumored. It would be really uncomfortable to have your existence rumored, I feel.
Yeah, that's tough.
No one's really asking questions about mine, which I'm comfortable with. Kimber actually appears in the film very briefly as the White House tour guide.
That's right.
And this is kind of like his first real public acknowledgement of Kimber. But he goes to see his actual daughter in the film, Laura Linney, who is like a prosecutor. She doesn't want anything to do with him. He's a criminal, and he tries to tell her he's going to go out of town.
Deadbeat jailbird dad.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And this is good casting. I do think Laura Linney exudes like an upper middle class aspirational field, where like everything nice she does is a little bit put on, but I think that's okay when she's trying to play somebody whose entire life is built in reaction to her jailbird father, like you're saying, Nima.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's also why I think she's good in like a Truman Show type role, where
which was the very next year. This is like pre-breakout Linney, right?
Yep.
She had done like Congo, Primal Fear.
Yeah, she's in Congo. She's very briefly in, she's got like in Dave, we mentioned. She's in Lorenzo's Oil. Mm-hmm. Primal Fear is the year before this.
Yeah.
And then Truman Show is Wolfgang Peterson, isn't it? Or is it Peter Weir?
It's Peter Weir.
It's Peter Weir.
Yeah.
Strike that from the record. But she is great in this, I think.
Although there is a horrible line that she has to read at the end of that scene when you meet her.
Yeah.
It ends like the line that we then cut from She
What
says,
is the
like,
line?
"Father, what have you done?"
Yeah. Yeah, she calls him father. It's really
Yeah.
strange. I wonder if she called her own dad that. Laura Linney's dad was like a
But she
playwright
called
named...
Luther earlier in the
Yes.
scene, which makes
In the
sense.
same scene. That's got the
Yes.
nice
I
distanced
mean,
thing.
spoiler
Right.
alert, sorry, but like the last scene, she uses a very different word.
She
when
calls him
talking to him.
daddy,
Calls him
Mhm.
daddy.
which is apparently, by the way, what Clint liked Sandra Locke to call him, which,
Oh.
we'll get into it. His other real life daughter, at the time, I believe he's only has the 2 daughters. Allison Eastwood appears at the very beginning of the film in the scene in the art gallery. She's the woman who comments on his sketching skills. And I will say, look, they're both charismatic people. They both have a lot of just natural magnetism. They
Just
have a
energy
little
of
bit
all kinds. Yeah.
too much sexual chemistry with one another.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I know that we're moving through the plot, but actually before the movie doesn't open with the heist.
Yes.
It opens with a little introduction to the Luther Whitney character
Mhm.
in an art gallery where he is
Yes.
sketching. He's sketching a painting, and there's this interaction with this like younger artist or art student. And she's looking at his sketches and is pseudo impressed by them, maybe. And then you see the shot of what he's been drawing, and he's been drawing like praying hands. And she comments, I guess she likes the way that he's rendered that, and
Yeah.
she says, "You must work with your hands." And it's like, oh, it's like really
Yeah.
cringy. And especially what I find really amazing about all this is that the movie is about like a lecherous, philandering older man with a
Mhm.
younger woman. And he's the bad
Yes.
guy, right? Like Gene Hackman's the bad guy. Like
Yes.
you're gross for doing that. And every other relationship or interaction that we see in the movie is Clint being that gross older man with younger women, and then later trying to set up Ed Harris, who's 47 at the time, with his own daughter after calling him a young man. So there's some amazing pieces here of like where Clint's conservative brain is, is so offended by a criminal Clinton sexual predator in the White House, and yet does everything he can while making, requisite old codger jokes about himself all the time.
Yeah.
Needs to be seen still as like a desirable sexual force for younger women.
So, I mean, the movie ultimately becomes, this is coming right after Bridges of Madison County, which we haven't, the episode on which we haven't actually recorded yet. But that movie is in some ways kind of Clint's romantic argument for the kind of non-monogamous way he's conducted his sexual relationships throughout his life. It's sort of the Clint Eastwood guide to romance in a way. And this feels like, in revisiting it, I thought, oh yeah, this is kind of about Clint starting to deal with the fact that he wasn't the greatest father or the most present father. And in rewatching it, I realized it's actually mostly just a movie about a daughter realizing that her absent father was actually being a good father the whole time.
Yeah, that is the problem, is that the lesson at the end is not that he has learned to be a better father. It's that she realizes,
it's that he was a great father the whole
or he
damn
at least could
time.
have been one if she let him.
No, I think it's even that, yes, you can be an absentee father, and that's actually can really be nice too. If somebody is just like looking at your fridge when you're not around, that's also a way to be a father.
Taking photos of big life events that you were not knowingly present at, because you're also a master of disguise.
Yeah. He's going pistachio disguising mode at his daughter's graduation or something. And she is exclusively moved by this. She's not at all freaked out. Like there isn't a moment where she's like, this is kind of weird.
Right. Why not just let me know you're there though?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not say hi? I don't know.
But Luther makes very strange decisions the whole time. I mean, why does he feel the need to not wait 10 minutes until the president's car drives away from the house before leaving?
There's no urgency.
Again, hey, MacGuffin I guess.
I guess I would want to get out of there quick too. Maybe he's hoping that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a gentleman thief.
You're not. That's right. You're not a jewel thief. I will say, I mean, just as we kind of, I think we've been speaking for about an hour and 45 minutes already on the first 4 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
the best movie.
But something we should also note is the setup, and the reason that I brought up VHS cassette tapes at the beginning of this is that before he cat burgles that evening, he goes to his friend Red's bar,
right,
and hands an empty VHS cassette tape, or maybe it's just something to be taped over. For all you kids out there, you could do that. You could reuse them.
Used to be
to his bartender friend Red, played by Mark
Margolis.
Yes, from Scarface, from Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, from all of the Darren Aronofsky films.
That's right. And of course, Hector Salamanca in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. So,
of course,
a great little 2 very short scenes that he has with his friend Red, who is his like alibi, right, for the crimes. Because little known fact to all you kids out there, back in the 90s, if the cops suspected that you did a crime, if you were able to tell them about the football game that had happened at the time in question,
air fucking tight.
No more questions. Clearly you knew what was going on because it's not like you could just TiVo or DVR things, or let alone stream them at the time.
These kids these days, they're obsessed with their TiVo.
You like that reference? That's good.
I did have a TiVo. I do like this. I like this bit quite a lot because it reminds me of the kind of airport novels that I really enjoy. I'm a big fan of the Michael Connelly books. Of course, Blood Work is going to get adapted quite soon by Eastwood. But there are always there's this little network of regular blue collar guys who
the crime helpers.
Crime helpers, exactly. We also get the Valerie, the forger. I love in a movie where somebody has like a go-to fake passport guy. I love
and
it.
their relationship is extremely unconventional to me. It is not like
that's actually one of the better scenes in the whole movie.
I totally agree. Yeah.
And she says something like 30% of my guys who run kill themselves within 5 years, which
that's right. She's genuinely concerned.
How many guys do you have that you do it in percents?
Mm-hmm.
Like how many people need a Northern Virginia or Southern Maryland fake passport person who
she's doing international passports. She's doing stamps. But
she hates those Asian passport stamps.
She gets requested to do Asian passport stamps so much. She knows that she doesn't like them because they're a pain in the ass. She also does wig and mustache work.
She's a wig maker. Yeah.
Is really special.
The little bit where he goes to pick up the tape. First of all, his whole outfit, he wears a lot of great outfits. There's the cute little hat and glasses that he's wearing in the art museum at the beginning. His outfit when he goes to, it's the same outfit when he goes to meet Laura Linney in the park and pick up the tape. He just looks cool. Like he just looks like a single old man on the town.
That's right. He's dapper. Whereas I think the president looks pretty schlubby the whole time.
Yes. Well, he's wearing presidential clothing.
I mean, also with Hackman looking rather Biden-esque in that first scene, incidentally.
It's true.
Interesting.
And maybe doing the kind of mealy-mouthed thing that also becomes part of presidential critiques starting in the 90s, maybe more than previously, where part of the big deal, jumping ahead quite a bit, but the thing that convinces Luther to not run, to stay and try to catch this guy out in his crime is watching the president give a press conference.
He's at the airport. Mm-hmm. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
That's right. He's about to get on a Continental Airlines flight, no less.
That's right.
Continental does not exist anymore. Yes. Another tech moment.
For all those kids out there. We talked about this on our, what was it? Is it Magnum Force? We went into a whole history of like little airlines that don't exist anymore. Oh, and the Gauntlet too, because there's a discussion of like whatever that airline was. But yeah, he's at the airport.
Yeah.
And he sees this press conference where the president is expressing grief and sympathy for his dear friends / sponsors, like dark money, political
benefactor.
Machiavelli. Exactly.
He's a good
Sullivan.
Billionaire. Walter Sullivan, the good billionaire.
He made clear very early on in the film by Ed Harris that actually we like this guy, which is important.
Ed Harris has so much respect for this man.
That's right.
He
a lot of regard.
Doesn't want to go public about the cuck chair because he doesn't want to damage the reputation of a man who's given $1 billion to charity.
Yes.
Right. Played by E.G. Marshall, no less, of 12 Angry Men.
I think his last role.
And E.G. Marshall played something like 3 or 4 presidents. Like he in Superman 2 with Gene Hackman, he's just the president. but he also played like Eisenhower and Roosevelt and Truman or something. He played 3 presidents he doesn't look anything like, but he's just got a real establishment thing about him. But what does he say, Ian, when he sees the president pretend to cry?
So, well, first, the president gives a speech about how, I think to me it read as like kind of bipartisan, maybe left leaning, Clinton-y type speech where he says, well, when I grew up, we didn't lock our doors.
Yeah, it's one of those.
And now we have to lock our doors. But what we're really doing is locking our doors to poverty, to suffering.
He says a lot about locking our hearts, which that's not like a great metaphor, William Goldman. But maybe the point is that he's it's
a parody,
shitty
kind of
president.
Yeah, exactly. So then Luther is incensed to see this guy express fake grief, and he is so mad that he can't help but saying, "You want to read this line?"
I would love to. You heartless whore. I'm not going to run from you. Wearing a really silly fedora and big glasses. He kind of looks like...
I liked his glasses. I thought he
kind of looks like Eastwood does when he is in Soviet disguise in Firefox. He's wearing kind of the stuff that he wore in 1984 to hide out within Moscow. But actually, my 2 question, and I'm just going to ask you now because I am interested. Have either of you ever asked a restaurant or bar employee to adjust the television in any way?
I would never do. This was like watching somebody leap from a building to see this.
Well, he does it twice. He says, "Can you turn that shit off?" And then he said, "Wait, turn it back on."
Yeah. No, that's not something I've ever done.
I guess when you get to the age where you're older than anyone who would work there. But.
Although the barman is also like late 50s or early 60s.
Yeah, but he's like, Nima, as you said, it's like when Clint calls Ed Harris
young man. It's
the point where, yeah, like my grandma calls my father and stepmom the kids. Like the kids are coming over for dinner and they're like retirement age. Anyway.
Have we seen, apropos very little, have we seen Ed Harris be like a romantic bumbling lead before? This is like
have you seen
storyline.
Did you see The Lost Daughter?
No.
He's like not like the main male lead in the film. Well, I guess maybe he is, but he is like an old man who I think fixes up the house where Olivia Colman is staying, and he is just a very sweet widower character. He's a great romantic lead when he wants to be. Is he the romantic lead in The Abyss? I don't remember what his relationship is to everyone else.
Don't remember either.
He's mostly in love with the deep blue sea, I think.
That water being.
Exactly, the pink guy. But yeah, he is kind of... I found him quite winning. I mean, I found his...
So did I. This is why I kind of wished for a sliding doors Ed Harris, being in more of these films when he could have been. Maybe it's not too late.
He's looked like this he looks like this in The Right Stuff, which is fully 15 years prior to this. Yeah. He's just looked like this old man.
But actually, I think he looks even better. I never finished Westworld. I don't know if you guys like Westworld, but...
They didn't finish Westworld. I don't think.
Okay, there you go. He still looks great. Man, just slotted into his look and has just mastered it.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Clint, like the lines are part of the appeal, so you're just going to get more appealing as you get more lines.
Well, yeah, I think in Places in the Heart, he had like a romantic, maybe not romantic, at least like sexualized character. It's from 84.
I haven't seen Places in the Heart. He is in a movie with, what's her name? Madeline Stowe, called China Moon. That is directed by John Bailey, the cinematographer of In the Line of Fire, that I believe is one of those 90s, like, what if you just want to watch movie stars pretend to have sex for like most of the movie? I think it's just a lot of heavy petting between Ed Harris and Madeline Stowe, which is a really weird pairing.
Well, another interesting connection here is that, as we said, the very next year, not only does Laura Linney do Truman Show, but Ed Harris is also a huge
mastermind director,
huge part in that same film. So they just did these back-to-back films together, which is I really thought about.
So Ed Harris is trying to solve the case, and they know that they figure out that it is related to this vault, and it's got one of those great lines that I love where he says, I talked to a friend at the bureau. He says there's only half a dozen guys in the world who could pull a job like this, which Goldman in his memoir says I think it was Tony Gilroy's idea, but it was just screenwriting shorthand. We can just cut to how they figure out it's this guy because someone said the job is too hard. And then he's got this scene with Clint where they're at the art museum, which is either the Corcoran Gallery in DC or an art museum in Baltimore. They shot in both of them. I can't figure out where it is, but they basically have like a flirtation scene where it's not unlike Clarice Starling going to see Hannibal Lecter and asking, "Can you help me with this?" But he also isn't sure if he suspects Clint's doing it. Clint knows he suspects that he did it. But they're sort of talking around the suspicion, and Luther's trying to help him solve the crime while also insinuating that he was involved without insinuating it, just playing with him. But I mean, it's very charming.
It is. It's a wonderful scene. He keeps eating grapes, like
He's
rusty
eating grapes.
Brad Pitt style. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, he's got this, as he's gotten a little bit frail, Clint, he's finally, I think, he's unlocked like a new kind of old man charm.
Yeah, there's a real twinkle in his eye.
Yeah, he's less threatening physically, I think,
during that whole scene. And yet another great kind of old tech reference. I think up until now we've had the VHS tape. Oh, there's like Sullivan's home security system that is
and then
bested
the fake out
by
with the CD changer.
Then there's this like multi-disc CD changer in the bedroom,
where she points the remote directly at Clint and then points it away. Yeah.
And then we get Clint's reference to, you break in and you steal the architectural plans of the place you're about to rob. And what do you do with them? You Xerox them. Then you get the originals back to where they need to be, and no one is the wiser. Yeah, so that's right.
I mean, that's great.
We have the old Xerox. So which again gets to this whole like, this is such a pre-internet thriller,
right?
Because like basically the entire thing would fall apart if there were any access to like if there were easier access to information.
Exactly, and I think it's one of those. As we approach the internet in 90s thrillers, I think they get better and better as the level of technology increases, but still never hits that point where any information is accessible from anywhere. This is like my favorite kind of shit is this sort of thing. I do want to shout out Seth Frank's partner, Laura, is played by Penny Johnson, sometimes credited as Penny Johnson Gerald, who was, to me, most notably Larry Sanders' assistant. She works for Larry Sanders. I forget what her actual role is, but she's very funny. She's kind of funny in this. I mean, she doesn't have a lot to do, but just nice to see her.
I feel like there was probably more for her to do in an earlier script, and then they just cut stuff out.
Totally agree, Nima. That's
all
the
of a sudden
feeling
she's gone, but she's in like she's Ed Harris's partner for the first two scenes, and then it's like she goes on vacation.
Well, his partner must become Laura Linney because she, at first, he convinces her that she needs to give over her father so that he can protect her dad because, if it's some young hotshot looking to make a name for himself, he'd probably kill your dad in cold blood. And so I'll bring him in safe, I promise. And she does this sequence. First of all, I have just a sickness. I have a mental brain disease. And I was watching the film Jackass Forever. Have you guys both seen Jackass Forever?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Jackass Forever opens with, like, the opening credit sequence is an elaborate Godzilla parody, but the Godzilla is played by Chris Pontius's penis painted green and shot macro style.
Makes sense.
And so there's a whole cityscape where all of the various Jackass crew are different types you would see in a Godzilla movie. Johnny Knoxville is like the kind of yeehaw army guy who's firing artillery shells at Chris Pontius's penis. I noticed in the theater, I'm sitting in the theater, and I say, this is whatever backlot they shot the Absolute Power restaurant scene on. I immediately clocked it. I don't know why. I looked it up. It's the Paramount backlot.
Wow.
I mean, it's very notably a backlot where they have it. It's all built around this kind of weird triangular hub of streets.
Yeah, it's a strange city block.
It's got that backlot thing where there's like a giant glass and steel office building way too close to some brownstones, which are then way too close to like a hardware store. Like none of these things, you're not really meant to shoot them all in the same frame. But I think they use this because they can command the whole streetscape for this really quite great sequence where Sullivan has hired Richard Jenkins, the like world's greatest hitman,
being a little bit nasty. I like to see nasty Richard Jenkins sometimes.
Yes, he's eating some kind of dessert at Sullivan's house, and Sullivan calls them sinful.
So
Like, this is
decadent because his
right,
chef
this
is
is
so
the-
amazing.
The most morally corrupt the man can be is to have too much sugar. So he hires him to kill Luther because he thinks Luther killed his wife. The Secret Service, they're trying to take out Luther because they don't want him to rat on the president.
And have tapped the Metro cops' phone lines. To
Exactly.
get the information.
And so Ed Harris and Scott Glenn are in this. They're in this art gallery, which I don't know if either of you noticed this. It says it's like a Carol Glenn exhibition, which is the name of Scott Glenn's wife, who is a visual artist.
I did see this,
which is just
It's
cute.
in the window. Mm-hmm.
He converted to Judaism when he married
just some
her.
nice production. Nice production
just
design.
sweet. I don't
Prop
know.
department being
Yeah.
kind.
And then there's some guys carrying a big pane of glass across the street or whatever. There's always guys doing this. And there's some reflection of the sun. It throws off Richard Jenkins's bullet just a tiny
But
bit.
there are multiple hitmen. Let's not forget that Dennis
Yeah.
Haysbert is also
right.
Trying to
is also sniper rifling from a van.
Right.
So there are
the rare
two
two
simultaneous.
snipers.
Yes.
It's true. Yeah.
And then Clint shows up dressed as Inspector Gadget. There's no other way to describe it. And you think this is so stupid. And then after the shooting, he disappears. His Inspector Gadget costume is on the ground. You're like, where did he go? And then we cut to the kitchen of the restaurant, the Cafe Alonzo, of course, where a policeman is saying, don't worry, folks, we've got it under control. No worries here. And then he turns and it's Clint, and he was wearing a police
Master of
uniform under.
disguise.
A
So good.
full, like, captain's uniform.
It's
He looks like
great.
a decorated officer.
Yeah,
it's really great.
It's great. Also, very briefly, what's with the Chinese guy? That's
Can
so
we?
bad.
I'm glad that we are not moving past that quite yet. This is in a movie full of cringe.
Yeah.
This is by far the cringiest part. There's this.
Why is he working at the Cafe Alonzo? First of
horrendous?
all,
Well, I mean, he can do whatever he wants, right?
but I mean, like,
I agree, Nima. He's allowed to work any damn where he
I agree.
pleases.
I agree.
Hey,
What I'm saying is, if you want to do a funny accent guy, you can. We all agree we can make fun
that's
of
what makes
Italians.
it even more offensive. That, of
Yeah.
course, is allowed
Mhm.
and encouraged. But this, like the pushy Chinese waiter with like pidgin English.
But he's also. It's very clearly the pidgin English of a guy from like Riverside.
Yes.
This is just clearly an Asian American actor who is not even like a lot of American stand-ups do like their mother character, like that's their whole bit. Like he's not even good at doing the accent.
All the things that he does right are things that only native English speakers could do right.
Yes.
And all the things he does wrong are like clearly effective. But I thought for sure watching this, I thought, okay, this must be something that they're setting
Right.
up. You know, this is like a Chekhov's gun thing.
No,
This is
turns out just being racist.
That's the
Like
whole
that,
bit.
that's
It's
the
only
entire
reason
bit
he's
is
there.
the entire bit is just to be racist. He's really pushy, and Laura Linney wants him to get out of there.
Can you believe some of these guys?
And then it's not even the like, oh my God, will this guy just leave? And we're being racist about it. But they have to really hammer the point home by cutting back to Ed Harris and Scott Glenn, right? The cop and the Secret Service agent who are, hoping to get Clint, at this rendezvous and joke around, knowing that Luther is a master of disguise. Ed Harris being, annoyed with this waiter insinuating himself into the scene, turns to Scott Glenn and says, maybe that's him, meaning Eastwood. Maybe that's him, disguised as a Chinaman.
Yeah. Felt like 20 years too late on this.
Yeah.
No way that people were saying this.
Right.
I'm hoping this was not in the Goldman script, but that either Ed or Clint was just like, I just feel like
it was funny.
That needs to happen. Like,
Yeah.
can you say that?
Yeah, I mean, this is not one of the movies where Clint is depicting the cops as racist bigots, which he has a number of movies like that.
Yeah.
So it's disappointing that this one snuck in where it seems like he likes this character and thinks this is a good thing to say.
Yeah.
To your 90s technology point, Nima, it's a number of times people in the film refer to their phone numbers. Like Scott Glenn gives Ed Harris a card and says, here's my numbers. And then later somebody says, check your numbers. Because like these guys, you can tell these guys are important because they got a lot of phones. They got different numbers they got to check.
They might even have a
Beepers,
fax number on
Yeah,
that card.
exactly.
Definitely a beeper number.
So where are we now?
We never see Richard Jenkins again, incidentally.
Well, he messed up. He's got to just leave.
I also had to check with myself at the end of the film.
Yeah.
I was like,
assassination
wait, did I forget?
failed, and then he disappears.
He's back
Clint
to Bogota
now,
or something. Yeah.
Clint now is able to get away, and we get a sequence back at Laura Linney's apartment.
Right, where he shows up. He's sort of hiding while she's flirting with Ed Harris for quite a long time. He has restocked her refrigerator with stuff that I imagine is what Clint Eastwood eats. Like there's alfalfa sprouts on top of and like Pellegrino.
40-year-old health food. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And she says, "I betrayed you twice, father." And he's like, "I don't care. My daughter asked to see me." You know, he's the ultimate dad. And then after this is when Haysbert tries to kill her, roughly, right? The president on the president's orders
for the second time.
On the president's orders. Well, right. Well, there's a lot going on in the meantime. I mean, in that scene, Laura Linney says to Clint, remember she's a prosecutor, and she implores him to, quote, go to the police. That's what innocent people do. They go to the police. And of course, he knows why he can't necessarily do that, although he does trust young man Seth Frank. But in the meantime, he's also playing this double game with the White House, right? So like, we haven't heard from Judy Davis in a while, but actually she's in this constantly. She's in the movie constantly,
right?
Berating Scott Glenn and Dennis Haysbert for not doing enough. There's a lot of weird, like, making Scott Glenn into a doctor joke.
Oh yeah, she makes him inspect.
Like, you're now a gynecologist, and then like a couple scenes later, President Gene Hackman is like, what made you a doctor? Like, because his arm is
right. Yeah, his wound is getting.
It's very strange. Which also makes him then knowable, right? Like, Hackman has no response to that.
The bigger part of that scene. Right. Yeah.
Right.
One, Ed Harris doesn't want the perpetrator to be Clint because of his record in Korea. He says, "I don't do war heroes."
That's right. And he's also impressed by who Scott Glenn is, because somehow the homicide detective from New York, who's now in DC, has heard of like a state cop named Bill
Burton. Yeah, he's like, "You're that."
Yeah,
he's like, "You're that Bill Burton," and like, so they have some kind of professional respect. But a critical scene that we have not yet discussed is when Clint drops off the very expensive diamond necklace that the wife of Walter was wearing during the murder scene that he also steals that night, and then he delivers that under the like ruse of having it sent from the president to his chief of staff, who we know is smitten with him. And then she wears that to like a White House function where they dance together in
that scene is great.
A very strange, kind of strange sexual thing going on. But they are excellent together in that scene, because you probably have the two best actors in the movie working together.
The psychosexual tango, which was going to be the title of the podcast, but we decided not to.
To me, I love... This is like the gentleman's thief revenge that I want in this type of picture, right? Mm-hmm. This is like...
He starts fucking with him.
Yeah, exactly. He's masterminded this thing where she doesn't know. She thinks this
Bad, he's like Walter White, so many steps ahead of everybody. He's just taunting them with his intellect, you know?
Which is why it's so whiplashy later when he just kills Dennis Haysbert with an injection to the neck. Feels very ungentleman thief-like. Well,
speaking of ketamine, it sounds like he might not kill him as much as he renders him like mentally inert for the rest of his life. He just like zoots him to death, to brain death. But yeah, that's after. So Judy Davis thinks the president has sent her the necklace. The president immediately recognized it as the necklace that was on the woman he murdered, or basically had murdered. And at this point, he's got to strike back at Luther by killing his daughter. Haysbert just pushes her car off of a cliff with his car, and she survives. Clint is closely behind in some beat up old Oldsmobile or something, and does an extremely, I don't know if you guys clocked this, a very slow like e-brake 180 on the grass on the cliff. Like, it is Clint because he gets out of the car. I was very impressed by this kind of like, not really a big part of the scene, but he does just flip the car around and then get out. At this point, he vows to, he's out for blood. He's going to get these guys. And then
I also like that, but just for a second, I like the idea that Dennis Haysbert, who is the bad deed doer, right? Of the White House inner circle, he gets
he's
all
the
the
wet
boy,
to borrow the phrase from
like he's gonna,
In the Line of Fire.
Right. He's going to do all the murdering, has these sniper skills, but also when it comes to killing a prosecutor, going where she usually parks her car to do her, running, running workout, just figures he's going to just roll up in like an SUV behind her and just push the car off the
broad
cliff.
daylight.
The loudest, slowest way to kill her. Yeah,
but he's wearing mirrored sunglasses, so they'll never know it was him.
They'll never possibly know. Also, probably had diplomatic plates. But I just thought that was a really interesting choice. Obviously, leading to the car falling off the cliff, being destroyed below, and then obviously influencing my near-death experience question from earlier.
Yes, of course. So after this, I mean, basically the next thing that happens is that Clint commandeers Old Man Sullivan's limousine and drives him to the White House, tells him what happened. And we get this kind of, I mean, it's not terribly cinematic, but it's a very fun ending where the world's oldest man walks into the White House and kills the president, presumably, and makes it look like a suicide. I mean, it's unclear if he actually put the letter opener into the president's heart or just talked him into it. Said like, this is the best, the most honorable way you can die is to kill yourself.
It is unclear, although speculating, it doesn't seem like we've been given a characterization of Gene Hackman's president that would suggest that he's looking for this type of out. It's not like he cares more about his reputation than, it seems like he's entirely self-serving at every other point.
Consider it a blip on the screen. This kind of behavior won't happen again. Although it's happened so much that they have like protocol. They have their usual, he said like earlier in the movie, Judy Davis asks if they heard a struggle and they said nothing out of the ordinary. Like he's normally roughhousing these women. And then Clint and daughter are reunited. Laura Linney calls him daddy and he's sketching her peacefully sleeping.
That's right.
Produced and directed by Clint Eastwood.
We should not forget that Scott Glenn also kills himself because
he preserves his honor 100%.
Exactly.
But he's got a big stack of his tapes, so he's got the evidence. He's provided extra evidence that Ed Harris can use.
Oh, we do also get an extremely unsubtle visit to the Watergate Hotel, where
of course
the chief of staff lives.
That's where Judy Davis apparently lives.
I grew up, or I spent a large portion of my childhood in the Northern Virginia area, and it was always so baffling to me that the Watergate Hotel is still there. It's still called that. It's still in use. You're not going to just change it to like hotels that have not become shorthand for corruption change their name all the time for no reason. Like it's not just called sort of Garden Vista by Marriott.
Exactly,
They totally embrace the brand.
I guess so. Yeah, there must be. I mean, there must be a ton of sickos who. I'm sure the merch at the Watergate is extremely lucrative for them. But I wanted to talk more broadly about all the things that this movie is pointing to. First of all, I was looking up who is the White House chief of staff at this time in real life, because obviously the Judy Davis character is a stand-in for Hillary. But White House chief of staff, right before, like when the movie is being made, and he leaves in January of 97, and this film comes out in February of 97, is of course
Leon Panetta, right?
Friend of the podcast, Leon Panetta, yes, who is a longtime Clint Eastwood friend because he's a Monterey native. He was representative for California's 16th congressional district, which includes Carmel, from 77 to 93, which is when Clint is the mayor. That's it, like in that period. But he's Clint's congressman, and he's like a Carmel resident, I think. They're golf buddies.
Yeah, you've sent me pictures of them together.
There's lots of photos. Yeah, I was looking at what Panetta did. He establishes the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, that's cool. Not going to knock him on that. He helped establish Cal State Monterey Bay at the former Fort Ord military base, which is where Clint was stationed during the Korean War. Like, starting a Cal State University, that's, I mean, at least on the less bad end of things you can do as a congressperson. And then, of course, he's on the Office of Management and Budget, and then becomes the chief of staff. And then Obama appoints him to director of the CIA, where he oversees the Panetta review of Bush era and then into Obama era torture practices, which I mean, Nima, I can't think of a single better person to ask about this. Is that good or bad? Is the Panetta review, like, where do we actually come down on the Panetta review?
Is the Panetta review good or bad is the question that I'm being asked on the Clint Eastwood podcast.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously a review of the torture by U.S. clandestine services that is made public sounds good, but like...
It sounds good, but then I think you also have to realize that if there's no intention for that to have any bearing on real accountability, what it is set up to actually do, right? It's set up so that you kind of preserve some semblance of investigation and integrity, while also recognizing the whole time that Obama was obsessed with looking forward, not backward, and no one was ever going to be.
We tortured some folks,
right? And so I think there's also, I mean, the fact that there is that document and it's not really referenced like as an important document about what the U.S. government has done tells you everything about the utility of it, right? You can go back and you can reference it. You're like, actually, like there's a lot of really fucked up things here that are written down and that are documented and affirmed, stuff we all knew, but then you actually have like a government report. But then you realize that like that government report was put together by someone that is just part of that whole thing and will only go on to get higher and higher levels of security clearance because he can be trusted to actually not turn that investigation into any real accountability or justice. Yeah,
this is making critique and subversive countercultural objections to government action part of government action in a way that's sort of like clears them of wrongdoing. Also, we've talked about Avril Haines on this podcast before. Pretty sure she was the one who was in charge when they were caught. The CIA was caught hacking into the whatever database
Dianne
for this
Feinstein.
review.
Wait, that was the House Intelligence Committee database that they hacked into, or are you thinking of a different database they hacked into?
No, yeah. And then she said, I think this is probably fine that this happened. I don't think we need to like get anybody in trouble. Everybody's like, these are all nice guys.
That's right. So I mean, there's this liberal tick where if you have investigated something or you are engaged in an investigation or you say that an investigation is important, that's the whole thing, right? Like you did it, then you did the justice.
Investigating police abuse.
Yeah, we're going to investigate it. Like we need to appoint someone.
Yeah, we acknowledge that it's
to
happening.
Invest it. We need to find out more information about this.
Right.
And then that is kind of synonymous with accountability, even though no one is actually ever held accountable for it. But you could say, well, it was investigated.
Meaningfully gets tried and hanged, I don't know if Ian, do you want to go on the record as a pro hanging podcast? What do you think?
Hang 'em high style. I'm going to say no. I don't know.
Let's keep talking about it. Yeah. We'll talk offline. I did want to mention something. This is from the Carmel magazine. They talked to Panetta in 2015 or something. I'm just going to read directly from Carmel magazine. It is one of the proudest achievements I've had in 40 years, Panetta told Carmel magazine in an exclusive interview. What made me so proud was the way the intelligence teams and the military teams worked together to accomplish something very special. When it all comes together as it did that night, it will be with me for the rest of my life. Of course, he's talking about the bin Laden raid. Longtime friends, such as Clint Eastwood, say Panetta would never take the credit or the glory for bin Laden's demise. Eastwood admires Panetta's humility. So I love that the first thing the Carmel magazine thinks to do is ask Clint Eastwood about the bin Laden raid. And he says, it's tinfoil hat time, guys. I think Leon operates under the radar, Eastwood says. People don't know too much about him. There's the highlight of the recent raid and capture of bin Laden, but Leon is a guy who tries to avoid the headlines in the limelight. He just goes ahead and does his job, and he has never gone out and begged for publicity like many politicians do. Capture? Raid and capture of bin Laden? Did Clint Eastwood just let something slip? Do we still have him? Is he like we talked about? We talked about Sounds
Leon
of the Lambs
told him a little too much.
Yeah,
exactly. Is bin Laden in
the same way they got out Alan Richmond for saying that Christy Sullivan was sick, and this is how they found
exactly.
it out.
Or like how the Rock knew about the bin Laden raid. Remember that tweet? He tweeted like something big about to go down, fam, or whatever, and then it was the bin Laden
12 hours before. Yeah.
So that just blew my mind. Do we have any final thoughts? I have a really difficult final question to end our discussion once we've got our final thoughts here.
I mean, I don't know if I have all that many final thoughts. I think this movie, getting back to what I think you said at the top of this episode, and in a way, Jake, is that this is both a mess and like a lot of fun. Like the pacing is weird. It's a bad script by a brilliant screenwriter. It has
he says
an
as much, by the way. He
all-star
says it wasn't a
cast.
great movie, but I had a fun time.
I appreciate
Yeah, I mean,
that.
and that's the whole thing, right? Like the cast is pretty remarkable, right? It's like a
Terrific.
super late night. I mean, Clint, Gene, like, I'm on a first name basis with these people, obviously.
Yeah.
Ed Harris, Judy Davis,
Yeah.
E.G. Marshall, Scott Glenn, Dennis Haysbert, Laura Linney, Richard Jenkins, Mark Margolis.
Yeah.
Like, fuck yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's just a year after Ed Harris was in The Rock.
Right.
But what's interesting also is that 1997, I was looking at movies from 97, and I remember seeing Absolute Power in the theater when it came out. And I also was remembering like what else came out that year. And it's a pretty amazing year for movies. Not that everything is like the finest kind of film, right? But like, I mean,
that's the Titanic year, right?
Titanic, Good Will Hunting. What else is that? Men in Black, Full Monty, LA Confidential, Gattaca, Contact was that year. Jackie Brown.
I'd put any of those on right now.
right?
This is like a.
This is like the best. It's like if you just gave TNT the rights to movies from 1997, they'd be fine.
At the beginning of yeah, this is TNT cable coverage for like a year. Right?
Yeah,
Dad's happy.
Yeah.
Like just do 97, right? And I'm that dad. I mean, I think
I was about to
say
Dad's happy and we're dad together.
Yeah, like that totally
here.
works for me. So when I'm looking at kind of what else had come out that year, what I in my late teenage years had to look forward to, having seen this, no doubt as a Valentine's Day date, of course. What I then had to look forward to for the rest of that year is pretty remarkable and very nostalgic. And so, I think I'll always have an affinity for this one, which is why I wanted to talk about this one and not say like True Crime, which I don't think I ever saw. I remember when it was in theaters. I remember seeing the marquee that said True Crime, right? Like at a one screen theater in the town that I went to school at. Incidentally, same alma mater as William Goldman. And yet this is probably one of the last Clint Eastwood movies, directed movies, that I like made time to see in the
Interesting.
theater, right? Like, I don't know if there are. I'm trying to think of what else came out. Oh no, I guess I saw $1 Million Baby in the theater. Okay. But that might, I don't know, that might be it after this.
That's crazy.
Of like deciding to go see like, ooh, the new Eastwood is out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when A Perfect World came out, it's like, I'm going to go see that. Like it's those two guys, right? And I think this may be kind of the last of those for me, which also has to do with, like how old I was at the time, when my priorities were, right? I'm going to go see more movies maybe when I'm in high school. But like, I just, was excited when you guys got in touch and asked me to come on, and very, very kindly gave me my choice of movies to talk about. And I really couldn't think of a better one because of all the politics and the kind of Clinton era weirdness, but also because I remember this Clint. Like I remember this aged Clint.
This is your
coming
Clint.
off of In the Line of Fire, coming off of Unforgiven just earlier in that decade. And this was sort of like my final relationship with Clint Eastwood as a filmmaker before I kind of stopped paying attention as much to what he was doing.
I mean, first of all, I can't recommend True Crime enough. It has exactly the same messy, great feeling as this one. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating everybody has a relationship with this guy. I mean, he is like, we were just talking, I were just talking about this clip of him on Carson, where Carson just, all he introduces him as is one of the most popular actors in the world, Clint Eastwood. Like he is like the president. He's like an institution, right? Mm-hmm. He is, you have your Eastwood the same way you have your president, the same way you have.
You just have to develop your relationship with him. Yeah, undeniably.
Exactly. Actually, not going to ask my hard question. It was, how would you replace the U.S. presidency to prevent corruption like this from happening? So I'm just going to throw that one out. It's probably going to take too long.
Great. Yeah, I had some similar questions about campaign finance reform. So just speculate in your free time.
Listeners, if you have any ideas, podcastreforme@gmail.com. Well, this is a great place to leave it. Nima Shirazi, thank you so much for coming on the show. Still kind of confused that you're here. Really appreciate it. Wonderful to have you. Where can folks find out what you're working on, all the good stuff, the place to find you on X, everyone's favorite website, x.com?
Yeah, that was a shock. I looked at my phone. I was like, the fuck is that? No, thank you guys. This has been been a sincere sensation, and just thanks again for inviting me on. Yeah, I do a podcast of my own, in part my own, with Adam Johnson. It's called Citations Needed. We have a wonderful team of people who work on it.
Just if the audience liked it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no thanks. They had heard of it, I guess, or heard of him. I didn't
it was
get
for
that
Adam.
applause.
Oh, sorry.
With a amazing team of folks who put that together, including Florence Burrow Adams and Trendell Lightburn and Julianne Tweeten. And you can find that podcast again called Citations Needed on all your favorite podcast platforms. So go check that out. We do media criticism when we can.
One of the best podcasts going. They should put it in. I was thinking about how to absolutely gas you up yesterday, and I genuinely believe this. They should put at least a couple episodes of Citations Needed on whatever the next Voyager record is that they send into outer space, just to know like how badly we were fucking up.
Right,
here
to understand
on Earth,
like how deeply anti-homeless propaganda was embedded in our society.
Aliens are like, so wait, the people aren't really stealing from Walgreens? What's going on?
Yeah, they're going to need to know that.
Our favorite podcast, I think it's safe for me to say, any podcasters we've had on prior or will in the future,
also
those are our favorite podcasts too, but it's our favorite podcast right now. Mm-hmm. Sincerely, thank you so much for being here. Ian, do you want to say anything nice to the nice man?
I would love to. Almost all of the, without putting us down too much, if I can be so self-aggrandizing as to lump us in together a little bit, many of the things that we talk about briefly on this podcast, so, various propaganda narratives, representations of labor on film or related to Hollywood, race, all of these things are covered so beautifully on Citations Needed. So if I can be so bold, I'll just say maybe if you've enjoyed any of our episodes and would like to actually learn about these topics, then I'm almost certain that country music, I'm pretty sure we referenced that episode when we talked about Honky Tonk Man.
Repair your brain cells with Citations Needed after you're done listening to this and bludgeoning yourself. Anyway, thanks, Nima.
Well, that is very, very kind to say. Very kind to say. We don't talk about Midnight Run nearly as much as we should, I will say. Well, so that's something you have up on us.
Yeah, just if you need any blurbs about that for your eventual Midnight Run episode, just reach out. We'll be happy to hop on the phone. Talk to Adam. Well, with that is our episode on Absolute Power. Thanks everybody for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. It helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad, email a link to your old boss. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcasty4Me. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a two-person Clint Eastwood podcast, you can email us at podcastyforme@gmail.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. Next week, what do we have? We've got Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh,
that's a good one. 3 hours. Not a moment poorly spent. I love this film. Very excited. Allison Eastwood, Overload. So looking forward to that one. Folks, if you want to check that one out, it is available all the usual places, your standard stuff. Ian, what about down there in Mexico? How do you watch this film?
If you want to see, this is the first version of this accent that was ever recorded, I think. Whatever accent this is the first time we got it on mic. You can find it on Amazon, on Microsoft, or on Apple TV.
Monona TV.
Now that's obviously Hillary Clinton, but
Monona TV.
She is having a problem. She can't.
Monona TV.
Monona TV. Anyway, check it out. Thanks again, Nima, for joining us, and thanks everybody for listening. We will catch you next time.